Good morning everyone, and welcome to my first video in a short series I'm doing that I'm calling Sourdough 101 for those of you who are wanting to get a sourdough starter going. Today I'll be discussing some of the tools and the flours I use and how to feed your starter, and I will have you watch while I am feeding my starter. So this is my starter and I have named her Esther. Esther's been going for about a month now. I did start her from scratch with flour and water. I'm not going to go into that with these videos. If you do want to know how to start a sourdough starter very easily and with the least amount of time possible, I suggest going to foodbodsourdough.com. I'll put that email or that web address in the comments. I don't get any kickbacks from recommending her plan. It's just a very easy plan and low maintenance. So this is Esther, my starter. So to get started with sourdough, you do want to have a large enough jar, because when you feed your sourdough, here's mine right here unfed, but after your sourdough gets established, usually after a couple of weeks, when you feed it, it's going to double and maybe even triple and then fall back down to somewhere around here. So you want a jar big enough to allow for that growth during the day. This is just a jar, or a container actually, it's plastic. I got it at a festival I went to. It was actually a lemonade container, so I've put a hole over where the straw was, because the main thing is you don't want air to get in. You don't want it to be tightly closed, but you don't want it to be able where fruit flies or ants or other insects can get in. So I close the lid all the way, except for I do leave a little bit of kind of leeway there. Initially I was using just a mason jar, and that worked, but it was just when I was getting in there, I'd always get my hand really dirty when I was stirring. But you can use a mason jar, any glass jar, and with this I would always just set the lid on top. So you just don't want to be screwing on a lid, because so having a too tight lid can make mold grow in your starter, and you don't want that either, because then you have to throw the whole thing away. So let's take a look what Esther's doing this morning. I've already taken a lot out of her because I'm making some bread, but see, she's got some nice bubbles. A clear jar is also nice, because that way you can kind of look. Since I've fed her, there's not a whole lot of activity going on the side, but yes, those bubbles are good. Your sourdough starter is also going to have a stinky smell. I kind of refer to it as one of my daughter's ex-boyfriends, who always had extremely stinky feet. But that's how we get that nice sour flavor. And also around your jar, I've got just a hair tie that kind of marks where she's at, so I can see if she's doubled or tripled after I fed her. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on sourdough. It can be very cheap. These are the flours I use. When I'm feeding Esther, I just feed her this whole wheat flour. You can also use rye. Those are the best two starters or flours for your starter. That'll help the growth the most. When I'm baking with sourdough, I use just this cheap all-purpose unbleached flour. You know, the more you get into it, you can use higher quality flours. That'll give you probably a different taste, a more quality bread, but it's up to you. So if I wasn't going to be baking with Esther today, she was up to here, but I took a lot out because I'm making some bread, and then I took also some out to make crackers. But let's say Esther was up to here and I was too busy today, I had to work, I didn't have time to do anything to bake with her. that's when you discard. So you will hear a lot about discard. I recommend not throwing your discard in the trash. That's just wasteful because there's so many things you can make with the discard. You can make discard breads, brownies, cakes, cookies. I make crackers, so this is my little cup of discard here that I'm going to make some crackers that are so quick to make and they're so good. So I recommend, not throwing your discard away. So when I'm not using my discard, I just keep it in the fridge in this bowl. And for that, you do want a tight fitting lid on it. But how big your starter is going to be is just dependent on how much you want to cook with your starter and how often. So if you're only going to cook once a week, you can just keep your starter in the fridge and bring it out once a week when you cook. I decided I wanted to cook more often, so that's why I just keep mine on the counter and feed her once or twice a day, depending on how much I need. So it's good just to keep a small amount. And then it takes about a day. Like last week, I cooked with Esther, and there was literally maybe a spoonful of starter. I didn't even know if she was gonna make it. I thought maybe I killed her. But I fed her a couple times that day and she was back up to here at the end of the day. So you can always keep just a tiny amount of starter and increase it when you need to. It's mainly just planning out your time. Some breads take 3 days really to make, but only 10 minutes each time. So it's not so much that you're devoting an entire day to making whatever it is, it's just planning it out. Some things, like right now, my bread dough that I have over here, I kind of mix it together. It's sitting for 15 minutes, and then I'll knead it, and then leave it for 6 hours. So it's not very time consuming all in one time. So let's finish out this video. I don't want them to be very long. So we're going to feed Esther, so I'm going to take the lid off. I would recommend getting a digital scale. That is a game changer. So here's what I do. First, I turn my scale on, and a lot of sourdough recipes are in grams, so you want to get a scale that measures in grams. That's so you get the most exact measurement. So Esther in her container weighs 173 grams. And two, before you start putting your sourdough in a container, mine's all wiped off, but I know that my container weighs 47 grams. So I'm not good at math in my head, so I'm going to do some quick math and then get back to you with feeding Esther. Okay, so I've done some quick math, and so apart from how much the jar weighs, which is the 47 grams, my actual starter in the jar weighs 126 grams. So when you're feeding your starter, most of the time you're going to do a 1-1-1 feeding. So however much starter you have, that's how much flour and water you're going to add as well. So I'm going to add 126, so that's going to make it 296. So I'm just going to dumping it in. So again, having a smaller starter, you're not going to have to use as much flour at a time, but I do bake a lot. Okay, so we're just about there. So that's how much flour I've added. And now we're going to get the water. It is better to use like bottled water as opposed to tap water. Whew, I might have added a little too much. So I'm going to take her off the scale and going to get my spoon. And I'm going to try to stir this. So I like to keep my starter a little bit thicker. So I'm going to put this on pause while I'm stirring, and then I'll let you see what it looks like in a minute. Okay, so she's all stirred. I want to show you this. I mean, I could leave her. It's really thick. Like, you see that? Like, it doesn't come off the spoon very easily. I could leave her like that because I found that it grows better when it's a little thick, but I am going to add a little bit more water. So let me stir that real quick. So I've added a little bit more water, and a good sign that you have a good starter. See, I'm already seeing a bubble over there. So she's already kind of started to eat. But you do want to give it a good vigorous stir. And then another thing too, I'm going to set the phone down a minute. Another thing too is just keeping your jar, all the cracks and crevices clean. So once I'm done feeding, I still just like to take my spatula and kind of go around. But yeah, she's already got a couple of bubbles going, so she is a happy girl. So we're gonna put the lid back on her. And then, see, I feed mine twice a day, which you don't have to. Again, that's because I cook a lot. I'm going to adjust my hair tie. So that shows me where she was at when I fed her this morning. So I know kind of where she will probably be tonight. But yeah, you couldn't feed once a day. You can put them in the fridge, feed once a week. It's just up to you. And then I like to keep her in a warm spot, so I'll either put her by my husband's computer, or if I really need her to rise pretty quickly, I will put her on top of the water heater, because that's the warmest place in the house. So I'm going to close out this video. It's pretty long. Sorry about that. Just to say, you don't have to spend a lot of money to cook with sourdough. This I'd already had. The flours, I think, were like $2.50 a piece. The scale was $12, but again, worth that every penny for sure. And then we just use bottled water. So I will make another video tomorrow. So have a good day.